Until Dawn's remake has undersold massively. This comes from developers Ballistic Moon, massively underselling, coming in with less sales than CONCORD. Sony's belabored live service hero shooter that was so poorly received, Sony removed it from sale after 2 weeks, despite a budget rumored to be around $400 million in total. There is an ongoing rumor that the 2015 original has been delisted from the PlayStation Network in an effort to boost remake sales. However, that does appear to be a bug at time of recording, as the game is available if you view Until Dawn on a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, not just online or through the PlayStation app. However, this isn't necessarily outside Sony's remit because they are delisting Horizon Zero Dawn on PC to replace it with the remake. So there is this weird ongoing mandate thing that Sony seem to have where they're playing with the idea of this is the definitive one, this is the remake, and that's what we're going to sell you for an inflated price point. In Until Dawn's case, it didn't follow the model of a $10 upgrade, a £10 upgrade. It was $60, £60, which is way too close to a premium price point when the game itself is quite buggy, quite like it doesn't have a whole lot of polish. I think it's demonstrably worse than the 2015 one. Me and Josh covered it on the wind-up earlier this week. But thoughts overall, I guess?
Yeah, big time that for me is the fact that they have really messed up. Why do they make this one the one exception to the rule where it should have been a $10 upgrade rather than a full ground up remake of a game from what year did it come
2015.
out? 2015. There you go.
Same year as Bloodborne.
Not making that. 2 weeks ago. Got it right. It's just like, it's all of these kind of remasters and whatever, all of them, there's a decent size of the fan base that goes, who is this for? Horizon, Last of, all of them, including Until Dawn. But when you go, we're going to do a full ground up remake, and they've just screwed the pooch on it, haven't they? I've not played the original, and I've not not played the remake. No, I haven't. It's not really for me, but I've seen enough of both to look at them and compare them and be like, this is clearly the lesser product.
Yeah.
Like the fact they've taken away like the blue filter and stuff, just they completely misunderstood that. And you're, no, it just needs to look like a flat video game. Like it's just so awful.
There's a lot
mess.
of like weird, I guess you would call it trend chasing. There is the removal of certain artistic direction stuff, like removing the blue filter, throwing the camera over the shoulder of your character so you're exploring areas more than just having the isometric cam. No fixed camera angles, you say, I'm out. Well, yeah, there you go. And it's like putting things in, like over editing and bringing in different like song backed moments that are a bit more like something you might find on Netflix for certain horror shows and things like that. It feels like a new age approach to it, which like I love Until Dawn, the 2015 one, as like this really cool teen horror slasher thing where you have all this agency and how it plays out. I do feel like the teen slasher genre is so underserved in gaming, so it's like, why not do this kind of thing? And I know that, at least I assume that their wider mandate is to tie it in with the movie because they're doing an Until Dawn movie, but then that's not out for Halloween, so like it feels like one project finished before the other one. But Josh, we were talking about it earlier because we were both playing through it. How'd you get on?
Well, yeah, Scott and I got codes for this, and I'm so pleased that we did and did not pay 60 quid for it because I actually don't even hate it. I mean, again, we went through this in the wind up. I don't think it's a bad product necessarily. I think it's a pointless product. Having played it, that is still my conclusion, because there are changes that I like, especially to the prologue, which is the most extensively changed, but the rest of it, like Si was alluding to there, it's the same and sometimes kind of worse. Sometimes it is better, sometimes the lighting is properly astonishing, sometimes the character models work and it all comes together, but I don't think it's consistent. And I think there's just as many times as when the new facial animations just look wonkier than what we got before. And like you said, you do take away from the original art style by making it more of an over-the-shoulder thing or losing that blue filter or what have you, and it's just inconsistent. And I think if this was one of those, Horizon Zero Dawn remasters or The Last of Us Part 2 remasters where existing owners can upgrade for a tenner, I would be here probably saying, yes, do it. It's worth that for the changes that have been made. But for 60 quid, no wonder it's selling like this, especially when, like you said, you can already get a good version of this that doesn't seem demonstrably inferior on PlayStation Plus or cheaply if you can pick it up secondhand. And that makes me just question why it was kind of made at all, because I don't want to knock, and again, mention this in the wind-up, so sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I don't want to knock the work that's been put into it, because they built it from the ground up, right? On paper, you can say that justifies the price that they're charging over than just a remaster. But you have to, if you're doing that work, you have to justify yourself still. You know what I mean? Like, no one forced you to do that amount of labor for this or sell it at this price point. And that's the issue I have with it, because I couldn't in full confidence say, you need to get this version over the original, because it's like they are two kind of different things, both with their pros and cons. is this worth 60 quid when you can get that cheaper? Absolutely not, in my opinion.
I think the original just feels more cohesive to me. And like, I've only done the first hour, if that. I just feel like the original, the original prologue like hits the ground sprinting, but at least it gets to the point a lot faster. And you get to make more decisions faster, or it feels like you do. It is interesting, Until Dawn Remake's developer, Ballistic Moon, they're headed up by a couple of people from Supermassive. I think they're the original Supermassive founders who broke off, started a new studio, and then, made this as their first game. So it's like, in a way, you're getting a more potentially definitive look at that vision, like throwing the camera over the shoulder and doing the sort of more survival horror take on it. I just think it's just one of those things where the 2015 one was a way more confident step forward, and like it does have a PS5 patch, like it runs at 4K 60 if you play it on PS5. So yeah, it's just a weirdly pointless thing.
It just seems like Sony in general seem adverse to the idea that games can be old and people can play old games and enjoy them. We know the old Gran Turismo quote.
Yeah.
That's a rather extreme version of that. But like, obviously they're making the movie. I think that there's a sequel. Is that right? It's a
rumored one.
Rumors that they're sequelizing
Fire Sprite is apparently making the next one. They've been confirmed to be working on a horror game, and I won't spoil it, but there are some tweaks that have been made to the original in this remake that maybe hint towards something to come.
That might be why I've seen it on social media.
Yes.
People were talking about there being a potential Until Dawn 2 and a movie, so they've decided to remake this because they're trying to franchise it.
Yes.
And it's like, sure, franchising it's one thing, but it doesn't mean you need to. No, you don't need to do this. People will be okay with playing the game from 10 years ago because the industry hasn't moved that far forward.
No, and also the 2015 one plays super well. And a lot of the animation, the facial animation in the remake is using the same rigging as the 2015 one, which makes it look weird because the faces are more photoreal in the remake, but then you've got like a bigger disparity between like the lack of lip sync or whatever. But yeah, that's a good point. Like they seem to be pushing ahead with this wider Until Dawn franchise, which I'm not going to do spoilers for the game, but like when you think about the components that make it up, it's like you could just get like, okay, this is the enemy. This you have it again. A bunch of teens get fed to the enemies again. Yeah. Like there's a way to sort of stretch that out and just do the brand thing.
I'd be interested in a sequel. I really would. I think there's a lot of potential there. I really liked Until Dawn's spiritual successor, The Quarry, which is kind of the same thing with a different subgenre focus, let's say. I think with this one, it's my issue is it's not enough of a remake. I think there is so much you can do with the original Until Dawn that might not have necessarily aged well. But I think, I also said this in the wind-up, please subscribe to the What Culture Game podcast. We have some good discussions sometimes. But my issue is like they're still using that rigging, the original motion capture, even though they have tweaked some things here and there, but they're also bound to the original script and the original voice acting because they haven't got the actors back to change any of that stuff. They've been able to edit that dialogue and they've been able to like reuse different takes and stuff, so they have been able to tweak it, but they haven't been able to rewrite. And I think that's a bit of an issue because it means now that remake is inherently limited because it's kind of like, I think it's halfway between a remaster and halfway between a remake, and it's similar to like The Last of Us Part 1, which I think is a better product, but that was another game that I thought was really well done, is my definitive version of The Last of Us. Could I have recommended you play that at 60 quid when it came out if you'd already played the original, or even if you had access to the original? I couldn't justify it, and that's coming from someone who loved the game. And if someone who loves these remakes and loves how they're put together can't justify the price, who can?
Well, literally, yeah. And I think it is that wider conversation of like the things that were set in motion by someone like Jim Ryan, like the wider multiple medium push. Like we're going to have a movie, we're going to have a game, and that game's going to be a remaster. And then when it sells, we'll do the sequel, we'll do the next major step forward or whatever. And then it's just a weird year for them. Like the push into live services hasn't really worked. I feel like people are cottoning on to this generation being the generation of remakes, the generation of remasters. And I think the goodwill around that is waning a little bit, although people are still, every comment section is still suggest, you guys should remake this, you'd remake Soul Reaver or whatever. And not like that. Don't do the one, there's the basic reskin, remake it or whatever. And I think it's interesting, that idea of like, does the industry need to have a newest version of something because it does have one foot in the tech space? Like, I like old games. I like it having a legacy. I'm completely fine with that.
That's the thing, not to harp on that point too much, but I remember when the announcement for the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster came out, they did the Sony blog and everything. And they're like, we're trying to bring it to parity for Forbidden West. It's like, I don't want parity with Forbidden West. Like, I want Forbidden West to be its own thing. Like, if people play the series, whatever series it is, they play the first game and then they see the sequel and they go, oh, that's why it was a big deal.
Do you want some more?
Here's the definable difference between the year that this came out and the year that this came out. This is why this feels like a big step up instead of just smoothing it all off. And
that's a really good point, because
stuff that really irritates me.
You've described something that I felt when they announced Last of Us Part 1, where I was like, this makes it feel weird, because it's like maybe the thing I was cottoning onto was like, I like that passage of time, where there had been 7 years in between the games. But yeah, that is like an interesting thing with them continuing to do this.
I think it's a funny one. I think it's kind of all in the price point. I don't think necessarily that the appetite for remasters and remakes has gone away. I just think that people are way more, have a higher bar for how much they're willing to pay for it.
True.
The Last of Us Part 1, right? That didn't sell massively when it first came out, but it's just dropped on PS Plus and its numbers are up like 1,250% or something. Last of Us Remastered Part 2, everyone before that was officially announced was going, do we really need this game remastered? And then it came out and it was one of those $10 upgrades. And then it was one of the highest selling games in the UK, right? So I think for the right price, or even better sometimes, for free, people want this stuff. It's just when they feel like they're being taken for a ride. And I do think when you sell a remake that doesn't convince you that it's anything more than a remaster, I think selling that for 60 quid is always, I think that's failed, right? I think if you're doing a remake now, it needs to be what Capcom's doing. It needs to be a Silent Hill 2. Even games that I love like Dead Space arguably weren't remade enough because they're coming so soon after the originals, especially in the case of the Sony stuff, Last of Us Until Dawn. Do we need an Until Dawn remake 9 years later that isn't really a remake anyway?
That's a really good point. I mean, like, yeah, and also like the lack of justifying the price point, whatever it is, goes hand in hand with the marketing. Like the marketing for the Until Dawn remake was really weird. Like there was hardly any reviews. It was just sort of like put them up whenever you can, like whenever you see them kind of thing. There wasn't that much gameplay out there. There weren't that many side by sides. They didn't really do a good job of convincing you needed it. It was just this thing that's there if you want it, if you want the most up-to-date version of a game. And I agree, like, yeah, if I'm going to go back and play something, why not boost the frame rate, boost the resolution? But at the same time, I think it is okay for a medium to have history. And I think you do lose something when you smooth off, when you apply the sequel's graphics to the original, then you make it all one big long thing. In terms of like how it feels to go through those games. That is interesting.